Hi readers, it's Lori. Welcome back to my channel and let's talk about the books that I read in the month of July. In the month of July, I was determined to participate in Krista's book, KetchupAthon, which she's done now 2 years in a row in partnership with Amy from Amy's Bookish Life. And last year's Ketchupathon was based on building a hamburger and choosing books based on the representation of a hamburger and all the toppings and things you could add. This year's Ketchupathon was based on creating an ice cream sundae. So I'm going to start with the books that I read for Ketchupathon, even though they're not in order. It just seems like it's easier to group them all together. And then I'll talk about the books I read outside of Ketchupathon. So the way they organized this readathon was to start with the bowl or the cone that you wanted to use, and then move on to the ice cream, the sauce, and the toppings. And then there were some extra things you could do as a result of some of the prompts and things that they thought would be fun. So let's start with the container, which was the waffle bowl. I chose the waffle bowl anyway. I like a cone, and I'm sort of loving a dish as a, as a diabetic. That's usually the best choice. But if I'm going to have what I really, really want, it's going to be a waffle bowl or a waffle cone. So that particular prompt was the newest book of the month on my shelves. And for the waffle cone newest book, I chose The Wishing Game by Meg Schaefer. Let's make it sort of straight. This may be my favorite book of 2023, you guys. Oh my gosh, I loved this so much. I was really thinking I was going to love it when I purchased it, and I did. If you haven't seen any of the buzz around this book, to be sort of brief about it, it is the story of a little girl who was a big fan of Jack Masterson's books that were kind of fantasies and reminiscent of something kind of like Willy Wonka, or kind of like maybe Harry Potter or other books that you just really get lost in. The books were called the Clock Island series. And as a young person, she ran away to Clock Island because she was not being treated particularly well by her family. Years later, as an adult, she's working as a teacher's aide at a school, and she meets a little boy named Christopher, who she adores. Christopher is in foster care, and he just wants a permanent family, and they have bonded very, very tightly. Jack Masterson opens up an opportunity for people who he sends a letter to come back to Clock Island. I don't want to give too much away. To come back to Clock Island and to compete in a game that he's created for one copy of a new Clock Island series book that he has written, and that person who gets that copy can do whatever they want with it. That's all I'm going to say, except this was magical and beautifully written. I cried through my tears of joy and of just being so moved by the way this story went. It had some moments where I thought there were going to be some predictable choices made, and there were not. So I wouldn't say that it was like it's all going to work out in this beautiful happy ending kind of scenario, like every little thing is going to be handled. But it was just glorious. 5 beautiful, wonderful, imaginative, sweet stars. Then for the ice cream, the kind of ice cream, I chose The Twist, and that was a new author to me. And I read Kiss Her Once for Me by Allison Cochran. Let me get this is just easier. So this was a romance, rom-com, holiday, obviously, setting, if you can tell by the kind of decorations behind these women, but maybe you can't. What I appreciated about this is it got better as I went along. When I was first starting, and I thought this is not going to be my thing, but it ended up working itself out. And so I think in the end, I gave it 3.5 stars, which I think I rounded up to 4. Let me see if that's accurate. Yeah, I rounded it up to 4, I think. So it was between a 3.5 and a 4 for me. Set in Portland, these two women meet on a very snowy day, and they're kind of stranded. So they spend the day together, maybe a couple of days together, and they have this instant chemistry and bond. And then something happens. We don't know for a while what it is that occurs that disconnects them completely. Fast forward a year later, one of the women, whose name is Ellie or Elle, is working in a coffee shop, and the landlord of that coffee shop comes in and they start having a conversation, and then they end up going to drinks, and he tells her that I want to make sure this is all in the synopsis. He's been gifted an inheritance, but he can't take the money unless he's married. So he makes a deal with Ellie to create a fake marriage so that he can get the money, and he'll give her a portion of the proceeds. So they go to his parents' cabin in the woods or wherever in Oregon, England, and she meets his family. And it turns out this woman that she had this kind of brief connection with, which was very, very romantic, is his sister. The story unfolds from there. It was just like I said, it was, I mean, I enjoyed it. I'm glad I read it. I'm not sad that I chose it as a book of the month pick. It was nice to have an escape from this extreme heat of the summer and read a book about winter and about snow. That I appreciated. It was like my Christmas in July read for sure. And I am interested in another read by Alison Cochrane. She does have another one that I found on Scribd, and I can't remember the name of it now. Let me see if I can find it. The Charm Offensive, that's it. So I might listen to that on Scribd. We'll see. It is a bit steamy. So it's an LGBTQ plus romance, does have some sex, does have some complex family dynamics, but nothing I would say that's a real trigger warning there. It was interesting, and it was definitely well written. So I'm not sad that I picked this one for my ice cream flavor. So my topping was Hot Fudge, and that was a dark cover. And this was a book that I'd had on my shelves for a while. The Light Pirate came out in December of 2022, which is also when I think I got Kiss Her Once for Me. Lily Brooks Dalton, new author to me. Love this cover. It's very eerie. I've really been looking forward to this one for a long time. I don't know why I didn't pick it up until now, and I'm especially happy that I did because I really, really enjoyed it. My partner had read it before I did, and so she was interested to see what I would think about it. I did not give it 5 stars. I gave it 4 stars. I'm not certain now why. I guess it was a little slow at times, maybe for me, now that I really think back on it. But it was an interesting plot development for sure. Frida and Kirby are married. Kirby has 2 sons from a previous marriage. They start dating because she was in Puerto Rico, and he's a lineman, and he came there to support the recovery when there was a hurricane in Puerto Rico. That's how they met. And then she becomes pregnant, and so they got married. So they were very newly married. She's got 2 stepsons. She's pregnant. He's gone a lot working these, storms and things. And there are a lot of storms where they live in Florida. One is coming up. He, of course, is called out to work. She's trying to care for these boys who aren't real crazy about her. And she's also starting to recognize that she might be in labor. And so her daughter is born during this hurricane, which is really intense, and her name is Wanda. Some other things happened during this storm that I don't want to reveal because I think that they should be revealed to you as they were to me. What I love about this book is that it's told in sort of 4 sections, and that is power, water, light, and time. So it follows this family, the experiences, but it also brings forward this kind of dystopian scenario where we examine the impact of the deterioration of the planet and the increase in extreme weather and what could happen to coastal states like Florida in the future if we aren't able to manage some of the things that are already happening to our planet, essentially. It had a humanitarian tone to it. It had a beautiful story to unfold with pretty deep exploration of these characters and family and found family. I really, really recommend it. It was very well done. I was looking at some toppings and I just couldn't get to them particularly, but I also did some activities. So some of the activities that you could do were to review a book of the month club book on the website, which I did, to read with a fun summer treat, which I did. I did a try a chapter with book of the month books, which I'm going to hopefully insert here if I can find the footage. I did participate in reading sprints, and I did feature a book of the month club book on Instagram. So I did all of those prompts actually in the 3 weeks of this readathon. So it was fun, and I am glad that I participated. So here's the try a chapter footage. So my goal for Try a Chapter today is that I'm going to read 4 of my Book of the Month Club books that I have not yet read. Some of them are pretty old. I've had them for a bit. And I want to prioritize from these 4 my next Book of the Month read after I've finished my reading in July. Other than that, I mean, I have some flexibility, but I really want to prioritize one of these because frankly, they're starting to pile up, and I want to be mindful of, kind of what I want to get to sooner than later. So I'm going to try to read a chapter first of The Postmistress of Paris. I'm probably going to read 1 chapter. I'm kind of embarrassed about this because love this author. I've read many of her other books. I was really anticipating this Book of the Month Club release when it came out. I was so excited to get my hands on it. And then here it sits. Here we go. Trying chapter 1. Okay, there are no chapters per se. They are a date and then a chapter and then a date and then a chapter, but they're not named numbered chapters, which I now realize there's no table of contents either. So I actually read the first 2 entries for Monday, January 17th, 1938. We start with Nene, who is a pilot, who is running her plane and has a bit of a scare for a moment, but she survives it. And then she goes to an art exhibit to see her friends who have invited her there. And they want her to see this particular artist whose name is Edouard Moss. And she is standing there getting ready to meet Edouard at the behest of her friends. And Edouard's daughter runs up and thinks that she is her mother, who has apparently died. So she resembles the child's mother. None of this is not in the synopsis, so I don't feel bad about telling you this. His life collides with Nene's in this sweeping tale of romance and danger set in a world aflame with personal and political passion during war-torn Europe. So that is The Postmistress of Paris, chapter 1 and 2-ish. I have to say that Meg Waite Clayton does an amazing job of describing scene, person, character, atmosphere, emotion. She's a great writer. If you've never read anything by her, I really recommend that you do. On to one of my oldest Book of the Month Club books is What's Mine and Yours by Naima Koster. I'll find out how to pronounce that in a minute. So I'm going to try this chapter. It is intense. We start with a man named Ray who owns a donut shop. It is not well known yet. It's new. So he has a reporter coming to hopefully drum up business so that he can be successful and marry the girl that he's seeing and provide a family for her and for her son, Guy. It goes through his day and it introduces you to Guy and to his wife, Jade. I don't want to say a whole lot except that this beginning chapter is 1992, and I think the rest of the book follows Guy and another girl, and it examines the relationship between integration and white children and Black children in North Carolina. This follows Guy and another child and their mothers. And I think that that is what this essentially is about. It follows a 20-year span, I think. So equity and inclusion in a time where it still needs so much work. It needs work now. It says a vibrant tapestry that moves between the years from the foothills of North Carolina to Atlanta, Los Angeles, and Paris. How they break apart and how they come back together. Really good. What's mine and yours is a high possibility. Okay, the next one is The Devil Takes You Home by Gabino Iglesias. I have had this one for a bit too, although not quite as long as the other two. So this one is, I think, a little bit of horror, a little bit of suspense. That's my sense of it. Came out in 2022. Chapter 1 is very short. Chapter 2 is very short, so I might actually read a couple of chapters of this just to get a sense of it. Okay, I remember this now, and why I bought it. It is billed as a novel that fans of S.A. Cosby and Stephen Graham Jones would like, even Sylvia Moreno Garcia. So that does sort of lend itself to the idea that this is a maybe horrific thriller in some way, but this follows Mario, whose daughter is very young and she has leukemia. And the first chapter starts out with the doctor saying, I think she's going to be okay. We have some treatment options, da, 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 da. The second chapter then delves into the fact that the treatment options are going to cost a ton of money and they don't have it. And his wife is freaking out. In lieu of the synopsis, this would lead you to understanding that Mario ends up taking a job that will either pay him $200,000 or perhaps get him killed. So he steps into a job that someone is assigning to him or giving him that will, be very risky and obviously I think takes him on the road, if I recall. So yeah, I mean, you guys, this is a really hard choice for me, but based on these three so far. But I have one more to go. I love this cover, The Magnolia Palace by Fiona Davis. I love Fiona Davis. It's generally historical fiction. It is generally dual timelines. I'm going to read the first couple chapters and I'll get back to you and tell you what it's about. This is tough. So The Magnolia Palace by Fiona Davis. It starts out in the 1919 timeline, which is, of course, the one in the past with Lillian Carter, who was a model for statues back in that time period. And she had been doing this for a very long time and was kind of famous and well known for it, but she was, to put it mildly, kind of losing her figure and maybe her appeal. So it begins with her kind of, I guess, growing a little weary of modeling and sitting still for these statue artists, but also in a predicament where she doesn't have enough money to pay her rent and her landlord is gone. She's not sure where he is and she's grateful because he won't be asking for the money, but she's also nervous because she's got to make some money and she's maybe not as appealing as she once was in this particular time period and that particular livelihood. But then her landlord's wife is found dead in the apartment and there's a note in the landlord's dresser that refers to her. So the police take her in for questioning. So that was chapter 1. But if you look at the synopsis, this follows Lillian after, I think, this devastating event. She tries to recover and gets a position hired as a secretary at the Frick Museum.
current timeline follows Veronica Weber, who is also a model. She's doing a photo shoot for Vogue at the Frick Museum, and something happens, and she and her boyfriend or friend Joshua are, I guess, dismissed from the Vogue shoot, but in some weird way, they stumble upon something that may give information and solve a crime that happened all those years ago. So we're assuming that was that crime. She definitely weaves a nice dual timeline story, and I remember being captivated by the lines of Fifth Avenue, and I remember it really deeply sort of examined two different women, but connected by some tragedy and some challenge. I have no idea which one of these I'm going to pick to read first. So I'm going to take some time with that. And then when I film my wrap up for Readathon, I'm going to pop this.
So of those tri-chapter books, the one that I decided it's time for me to read is The Magnolia Palace by Fiona Davis. If you watched my recent book chat kind of thing, you know that I am taking a little bit of a break from thrillers. And so The Magnolia Palace hopefully will fit the bill for me. Historical fiction. There is a mystery in all of these. So I guess there's that. There's some hidden messages in the museum, and there's a hunt that reveals some secrets about the family, but so it's not really a thriller. So what else did I read in the month of July? Okay, I started off the month with War D by Frida McFadden. This is my second Frida McFadden. People absolutely love Frida McFadden. And I'm not in the love camp, but I think that they're solid reads. I listened to War D. I think I got it on Scribd, or yeah, it must have been Scribd because I didn't buy it. I gave this one 3 stars, as the same that I gave the last one of hers that I read. It is set in a psych unit of a hospital, which I really appreciated, where a young intern whose name is Amy is spending the night. And this is a secure psychiatric ward, so of course no one can leave for the entire night, which makes it even more thrillery and creepy, right? And she partners with a doctor there who is assigned to that evening shift, as well as another fellow student that she used to be in a relationship with. The setting of this novel is really my favorite character. I really appreciated the kind of the tension that is really just right out the gate present when you consider the setting of this particular novel. Amy was, I don't know, her character was fine. She was just a little sophomoric, maybe a little bit less, I guess, what I would consider an intern to kind of be feeling or sensing, although of course I don't think this was her specialty. But yeah, the characters were just a little bit transparent and predictable, but I did enjoy it and I'm glad I read it. The Senator's Wife by Liv Constantine was one that I had really anticipated, and I only gave it 3 stars too. It was a bit of a disappointment for me. So there's Sloane and Whit Montgomery, and Sloane is, her husband died, and she's kind of recovering and moving on. And so she marries Whit, who is a senator, as her husband was as well. And she has lupus. And so at some point in the fairly beginnings of the novel, we discover that she's having a hip replacement. Her husband, Whit, hires someone to take care of her during the recovery after the surgery. And little by little, Sloane deteriorates physically and mentally, and there is some fear that she's had a relapse of her lupus. And then there's also this premise that probably somebody is doing something sinister to Sloane, and there's a lot of secrets in this one. It is a thriller. I didn't really like I said, love it. It just seemed like it was endless. It had a build up, and then it had just this plane of time where everything it was kind of the same, a little bit predictable in what occurs, and then a little bit of a wrap up that was it was good. I mean, it was solidly written. There's no question, but it wasn't my favorite for sure. I think I liked the other book that I read by Liv Constantine, which is a partnership of two sisters. I think I liked that one better for sure. And then the last one I read was An Honest Lie by Taryn Fisher, which was for my book club in New Orleans that I talked about in another video as well. I really enjoyed going to New Orleans and being a part of this book club and talking about the book. And we all kind of felt the same way. So this is interesting because the way that it describes this book in the synopsis is pretty significantly different than what you get, because it doesn't tell you what Rainie's disturbing past is. So I'm not going to tell you what her disturbing past is per se, but I'm going to tell you that it has trigger warnings for sexual assault. It has trigger warnings for being isolated in a group of people, or in other words, in a cultish kind of situation. It has some trigger warnings for pretty significant violence. The main character of this book is Rainie, and she's in a relationship with a man that she's been with for a bit. She's an artist. She's pretty successful. The man's name is Grant, and he has a lot of friends that he comes into the relationship with, and she relocates for Grant because she really does like him a lot. And he encourages her to get to know his friends and his friends' wives in particular. And there's this kind of group of them. And she's trying to create relationships with these women to support what her boyfriend wants her to do. One of them in particular, Braith, is one of her favorites, as well as Viola. The others are kind of like, And she's not real keen on spending time with women and people. But they go away on a trip to Las Vegas, and something happens to Braith. An Honest Lie is not her first novel. This one was blurbed by Colleen Hoover. So it was okay. I gave it, how many stars did I give it? I gave it 4 stars, which was a roundup from 3.5, which was the consensus of almost everyone at the book club. Okay, that is my reading wrap up for the month of July. I read 6 books. Yes. And I really did have a pretty good reading month, but you could probably see why I decided I needed to take a break from some thrillers. I just was noticing that maybe those would have been 4 and 5-star reads for me a couple of months ago, before I was sort of saturated with all of this. Let me know if you've read any of these. Let me know if they're on your radar. Certainly don't not read some of them because it wasn't the best experience for me, because again, I might just be in a bit of a thrillery funk. As always, I appreciate your views, your comments. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. Send some friends my way if you feel like it. And as always, happy reading. Bye.